And I'm supposed to do myself as good. So good morning, everyone. Happy Lag BaOmer. Though it's a question if we are supposed to celebrate Lag BaOmer, there are rabbis who said that there's no reason to make any celebrations. So we can open a whole discussion about that. But I actually want to start with Lag BaOmer. Can anyone here help me and tell me what is Lag BaOmer? What is being celebrated? I know the shiur is supposed to be in the Jewish timeline, but I promise I'm going to connect these two things: the Jewish timeline and the question of Lag BaOmer. So, what do you say? What is Lag BaOmer?
Isn't it the day when the Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students stopped dying on that day?
So that's one of the traditions that is connected to Rabbi Akiva's students who stopped dying. The only problem with this tradition is that the Talmud says the opposite, not the opposite, but gives another date. It says that they died during the Sfirat HaOmer, but stopped dying in Atzeret, which is Shavuot. So, it's a good interpretation, and you're right. This is what the reasons that many stops the rules of not to shave and so on. That stops in the Lag BaOmer because of the story, as you said, that they stopped dying. But the problem is that this is the wrong date, because we know the date as it says in Talmud. So what's another option?
Is Rabbi Bar Yochai also?
Yes, so there's a connection to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Of course, again, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he didn't know that this was a big celebration on this date. He never heard of the 18th of Iyar or anything like that. The connection between Lag BaOmer and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai starts 700 years ago, and people think that it's maybe the day of passing, day of birth, which he didn't know of, and other option is the day that he revealed the secrets of Kabbalah to his students, which again there's no. Again, he didn't know that he started revealing them at that date. So what we actually have, we have a weird date that many Jews around the world celebrate, but with many different interpretations. In the past, it was actually a fast day to some. It was called Tzom Yoshua bin Nun. That some say that because of the day that Yoshua bin Nun passed away, and then there was a great earthquake in Israel that probably happened at that date, Harash Hagadol, which is mentioned in Kahir, in the what we call the Gniza Kahirit. You know, I don't know. Gniza, you know what it is? The place where we bury Jewish holy books. And in Cairo, about 150 years ago, they found one of the two greatest findings of Jewish history, and actually for the world, it was also one of the greatest findings could have found, because what happened that in Cairo they had a huge room where they used to throw all their Jewish findings, all the Jewish texts, including everything that was written in Hebrew. So what happened? There was a treasure because it's dry in Cairo, so the papers, the books were still usable. You could still read them, and it was 2,000 almost 2,000 years of documentations from Jews in Egypt of letters, and so they found many letters, for example, written by the Rambam. that no one knew of, and books that Jews didn't know about, and it's an amazing finding. And there they found, for example, a list of dates that are mentioned in Eretz Israel, and one of them was in 18th of Iyar. So we had a traditionally historical day, but that was connected to a fast day, to something that was actually sad and not celebrated. And the connection that they did it to the great earthquake. And which great earthquake happened that date? There was if we go back to we go to Roman and Christian history. There was as you know, who made Rome Christian?
Petrus? No?
No, but who made the Rome, the empire? Not the one who brought. It was Constantinus, the emperor, and when he did that, it was a huge change of Rome. Now the emperor after him, he wanted to change it back. And what is the best way to prove Christianity is wrong at that time? Let's see if you're a political. What is the easiest way to prove that Christianity doesn't work, that it's wrong? So the easy solution is if the Jews rebuild their temple, because then the whole story about God choosing them instead of them, it will all fall apart. So he decides as an emperor to build the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, rebuild and in that way he will ruin Christianity completely. And what happened was the exact opposite. I hope I'm not going to now prove any of you that Christianity is right, but they definitely got this project had the opposite effect, because they started rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem, and there are different writings about it from Jewish sources about what a great event it was. Then came one of the biggest earthquakes in the area at that time, and destroyed this whole project. So if anyone wanted the proof from the heavens that that Christianity here, that is what happened. So that became, and the date of the earthquake was also 18th of Iyar. So that was a time mentioned, which probably at that time was where all the Jews' hopes were ruined completely. Like suddenly there was a wake of, wow, now we are rebuilding and we are recreating the Jewish belief and the temple and all the Jewish life that is connected to it. But the dreams became to a nightmare that continued until the Zionism, some would say, and some would say until today, and some would argue different things. But now, why do I tell you all this story? I promised that we will be connected. First of all, is because what I just told you, I don't know, maybe 10 rabbis around the world know. They don't know these stories. So it's not something that is a common knowledge. It's not written in the halakha books. It's not written in history books. You need to be a real nerd in history to know these things. And why does it matter? Because it matters regarding how do we approach the question of Jewish history. Because I can tell you today all this story, but if you go around and ask people, why do you celebrate Lag BaOmer? There are only two reasons. One is connected to Bar Kokhba and Rabbi Akiva, that are in a way connected, and the other is connected to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
Sorry, Rabbi. I have tried to raise my hands a couple of times. Sorry.
Oh,
it's just because when I grew up, we didn't call it Lag BaOmer, we called it Lag LaOmer, and I for a long time I didn't understand the difference. Sephardic Jews don't say Lag BaOmer, we say Lag LaOmer. Have you heard about that?
No, I haven't heard about this
Okay.
difference. The thing is, when you say Sirat Omer, like we did the last 33 days, when you say the number, you will say La Omer. Hayom 33 יום שהם 4 שבועות או 5 ימים לעומר.
Okay.
So
I was told something that was
say
different.
Sirat Omer, you end with La Omer, but I've never heard of saying Lag LaOmer instead of Lag BaOmer.
Okay,
but
sorry.
it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just have.
I was hoping you
So-
could tell me the real difference between these two.
No,
Because my dad always
no
said
difference.
Lak Laoma.
No difference. But if I go back, so why does it matter? Because it's much more important what people celebrate than the historical creation and changes. So what I told you is less important, even though it might be the historical truth, how it started, and then maybe people had a day that they was celebrated, and they got new interpretation to what the day really means. What is more important is what the people believe in than the historical question of what happened. It's interesting, the historical question, what happened, but it's only interesting, not more than that. Because it's not the thing we celebrate. We celebrate what Jews celebrate. And that's why I celebrate too, when there's something to celebrate if there is something to celebrate in the Lag BaOmer, as I said, the main ultra-Orthodox rabbi, Chatam Sofer, the one who started all the Orthodoxy, he said that you're not supposed to celebrate at all in Lag BaOmer. There's no celebration that should be mentioned. But when I celebrate the things Jews do. So it will be connected to either Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai or the story of Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kochva. These are the things that I will celebrate because this is what Jews celebrate. And this is important also with the questions of the Jewish timeline. Because when we come to the Jewish timeline, I'm not going to give you now a history lesson of what really happened. It's not because it's not important. The important thing is, what is the Jewish timeline according to our understanding? What is the common knowledge? And to start with that, we will start with the Jewish calendar. I know you had a few shiurim about the Jewish calendar. And now I am going to the last part, which is probably the part that my great uncle Pinchas, when he taught you, he didn't go so much up. He taught to you about the year, about how it's structured and such. Now I'm going to go to the last part, the number of the year, right? Which is our Jewish year today, as you all know.
10,784.
Yes. Thank you. Very good. And Paolo, if you already started, so I'll continue asking you. When which
When
no,
we
never
start
mind.
counting. When we start
My
counting.
question is what happened in year 2?
Adam or Eva, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, so probably because when we count this account, 5,784, in year 2 they didn't have knowledge that this was the year 2. In year 100 they didn't have knowledge that this was the year 100. In the year 1000 they didn't have the knowledge of that it was the year 1000. Not even in year 3000 they didn't have knowledge that we're in year 3000. Why do I say that? What's very unique in the Jewish calendar, I'm not sure if there's any other calendars alike. This calendar came to life long time after it started. So the counting of the years weren't counted to the creation. And now I will check your knowledge in the Torah. When we have counting in the Torah, What is the date that they count from?
I don't know. But I think they start counting with the Adam and Eva is the 0.0 something like that.
From which year?
From Adam and Eve.
But in the Torah we have different counts of years. What is the count of years in the Torah?
No idea.
You studied a lot of Torah, I know. So
not enough. Looks like.
Yes, Rebecca, are you trying? You can see your anyone? Come on, be brave.
Isn't it like how long somebody lived?
You have count of people how many years they lived. Yes, and in their 90th year, so you have sometimes in the beginning of a when it talks about Abraham, it will say the year Abraham ben 70 shana. He was 70 years, or he was 90, or he was 99, 100. These things would come. So this is partially, but that's very specific in a specific time. Yes, Florian?
Is it at the time of the flood?
I don't remember. There is, when you talk about the flood, within, like since the flood started, how much time did pass? But you don't use that later on, right? You don't. When Abraham was born, it doesn't say this is so and so years after the flood. So the simple answer in the Torah is to Exodus. So in so and so years since they left Egypt. This is in the Torah. In the Torah, already from Sefer Shmot and all the rest of the books of the Torah, it's connected to since Exodus, and it's actually one of the times in the prophets that it does the same. When it says it counts like 480 years since Exodus. So you have like a major event. So they didn't know that they're counting since Adam and Eve or since the creation of the world. They counted to the Exodus. The rest of the prophets always counts with the king's comparison. Like how many years to the king of Judea something happened in Israel. And then when you talk about Judea, they say how many years in that king of Israel. So they use these timelines, which are actually quite accurate. Historically, the historians accept them also as very, very accurate. More or less the time frame of the kings. So that is that was also something. There are different timelines. The time that we will use today, and Jews use the last, I would say, 1,000 years, is the time from the creation. But it comes, as I said, much, much later. The Mishnah and Talmud didn't know of counting to creation. Maybe in the Talmud is one place that is a brief mentioning of that. The main place where we actually count that is the Ketubah. This is where we started writing something that it came through all the Jewish communities, and it's connected to the time when they started to count these times since creation. This was when the Talmud asks what the time of the creation. They don't ask the year; they ask which month. Is it Nisan or Tishrei? It wasn't important for the Talmud to ask how many exactly year is it since creation. What is really today in the world when you talk about clashes between religion and science is because that question. That question wasn't interesting for Jews in the past at all. Like And that's also important to mention. So let's go now to the timeline itself. And we'll go through the most important things to know. There's so many details. I will send you a link to a online. I'll send it now in the. Where do I send a message? How do I send a message now? Can't find that. Where do I send messages?
You go to the chat. It's
No, yeah,
beside-
but I don't have a one called chat. It's like it
at the
disappeared.
bottom, just beside the share
Oh,
screen.
here, yeah, no, it's been my 3 dots. Good. So I'm sending you a link, but I will also share mine so we can be that everyone can be there. You have the link now, but I will share it. Yeah, so I didn't create this timeline. Luckily, there are others that did the hard work for me. And as I said, this is a timeline that is a traditional timeline. Okay, it's not a timeline of historians. So, for example, if historians and archaeologists will discuss about different events, if they happened or not, and when they happened, this goes according to the traditional timeline that comes from a book called Seder Olam Rabbah. And Seder Olam Rabbah, so it starts traditionally according to the simple story of the Bible, without doubting, did this really happen or not? Like, I'm not going into this question. If it happened, and it can be discussed in different ways, then this is more or less the time that it was supposed to happen. Okay, this is important. And I will start. You can see here the chart. These colors of these are supposed to be the amount of population. Again, very problematic. The part that is definitely right is when you come to since the year, I don't know, 500 or 1,000. At that time, the estimation are more accurate historically, and until today. When we go back, this is connected to different. For example, here you go to demographics that are either speculative or connected to something that was written in the Bible, but are very challenging. For one of the classical questions is, for example, the question of how many Israelites were in Egypt, and when they come within 4 generations from 70 people to 70 men to 600,000. And that is quite impressive. So, and that's why many people, it's questionable, the question of the exact numbers, but the numbers that are written here are the ones from written in the Bible, accepting them. So this is also what's written here, without putting the question mark, was it really or not? It's, again, it doesn't matter. What matters is what the story tells us. Usually the thumb rule when you come to ancient numbers, I don't know if you know it, but also if you talk about Rome and others, when you talk about the thumb rule is you take off 1 0 and then it's more or less accurate. If there was, as he said, there were 100,000 soldiers who died in the war, then probably it was around 10,000. That's a thumb rule in learning history. It's not accurate, but it's like a thumb rule if you want to know more or less. So maybe the same thing can apply to the Torah, but again, I'll be cautious with saying that out loud. Oh, I just did. So yes, let's go through the time that are important. And you can see here in this so many different aspects, right? You can see the year, the Jewish year, every like 1,000 years until today, or until this graph was made in 5,760, and then you have people, for example, Jewish historical figures of these according to this timeline. You have here the regular years. So you can see that they put here the year 1 and not the year 0. I think maybe to underline, because they don't want to look so much about Jesus, but and you can see that they couldn't resist saying that Jesus was born -4, and not in the year 0, just to stick it to those who say we count to the BCE, burn of Christ, so before Christ, or C. So here we have like the most important Jewish historical figures. I won't talk about that. You can all, I shared the link. This is a website you can play with a long time. Like look on each one of the most important figures, and it basically covers the most important things. Like it covered all the most important, and so I suggest you all go and play with the website and see the different times. What do we need to see? The main part, I would say, is what we call the rabbinical era. You can see here. Can you see my mouth when I show? Good. So the place here, when we talk about rabbinical era, this is the main thing we use to talk about the periods of Jewish history. This is the periods according to the books. Okay, so these are the ones when you use in rabbinical setting. This is what we will use to talk about a different period, when something evolved. So we start the period of the Tkufat Avot, the patriarchs, right? And the patriarchs, I hope I don't need to tell you that the patriarchs is Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. This is the main patriarchs. But when we talk about so Tkufat Avot is until Egypt. By the way, you can also see that they put here who has control over Israel at that time, which is also fun thing to play with, to see who which different empire had control of Israel, which, by the way, gives us one of the biggest challenges in Jewish history: the question of Exodus from Egypt, right? Because who had control of Israel at the time of the Exodus? It was Egypt. So they come out of Egypt, go all the way around, and go back into an area that is in the Egyptian control in Israel. There are some answers to that historically, how can it be, but it's an interesting fact that they go out of Egypt and go back to an Egyptian controlled area of Eretz Canaan of that time that is under Egyptian control. But again, it doesn't matter the historical, because we hear about the story and not about history. So we start with the patriarchs, and that will go all the way until, I would say, until Yeshua, until we go back into the land of Israel. So that will continue this Tkufa, we have the patriarch live life in Egypt, Exodus, and until this will be the year, the time of the judges is right after Yoshua bin Nun, the entry to Israel. And then we have, now it goes according to the books of the Tanakh. So we have the period of the judges, which is quite long, Sefer Shoftim, until the time of the kings. So when we go from being a wandering people to a more, sorry, I have need to sneeze, turning into a kingdom. Okay, good. So so this is one very important part, going from time of the judges to the time of the kings. Time of the kings, you have the building of the first temple, King David, the separation of the two kingdoms, and so on. This is all what happens here. I'm not going to. The problem with everything I touch goes to Wikipedia. So the time of the kings is history. I would say those of you who like history, the archaeological, the different debates within historians about the first years, they end more or less in, I would say, minus 700, minus 750. From then, all historians are agree that the timeline and the main events are more or less accurate in the Bible and in history-wise. And then they discuss about the time before. Historians will say that the way it was told was, as we always say, that the winners are the ones to tell the history. So it was told by the kings of Judea, who wanted to paint all the time before as more where Judea should have been much more important. And then some new historians will say, no, Israel was much more. This was the main kingdom. Judea was nothing, and there was no original whole kingdom. But we follow the biblical story, which believe that it starts from King David. Again, a good example. Why should we be careful with believing to historians? Because historians always say things according to what they found, but they can't tell things about what they didn't found. So a long time, these what we call new historians are actually connected to what we call the Copenhagen School in history. They said that King David never existed, and then until they found a place where Beit David was mentioned, and suddenly we say, oh no, okay, so he did exist, but he wasn't important. So changing history because or building a story because of things you didn't found is very problematic, and that's why I won't go into the historian debates about it. Let the historian debate about it. We'll stick to the biblical story. So this is the time of the time after the judges, time of the kingdom, and that continues until when we come to the end of the kingdoms. It's with the first destruction of the temple. You can see here that the main dates are marked with bold. So minus 586, destruction of the first temple by Babylon, because this is the start of the first exile, and a huge change of the Jewish political situation. So this is the first destruction of the by Babylon. Again, a date that we are very that is very accurate. Then, when we go 70 years front, and we go to Tqufat Beit Sheni. So here, it actually doesn't say here, but you will use this usually at the first from the beginning of the kings until the destruction, the first temple time, and then Beit Sheni. Okay, Beit Sheni is the second temple, the first temple. In the Beit Sheni happened a lot of interesting things. What do you remember from Beit Sheni? Again, it's not a history lesson of taking all of it. I would say the main dates that are important to remember. In the middle of the Beit Sheni comes a huge change of empires. And you can see that even though we have a temple, even though we have kings, we are under rulings of others. Even the short period that it says here, the Hashmonea kings, they were kings by the support of greater empires. So they weren't really, they were independent, but with a very big, they couldn't do it without the support of Greece, for example, at the time, and then going over to the Roman Empire. A great year to remember is the year that the Greeks came to Israel. So this is when suddenly the European empires come over, and it's a change before it. Disturbing the eyes too. At the time of and before the fight of Eretz Canaan is the empires from the east and the west, and the empires were Egypt or Babylon, Assyrian, and all the ones from the, and also in the ancient past. This were the main forces that were connected to Israel. Suddenly, when the Greeks come, it changes the whole picture. The year that they come, at the one of those that the easiest to remember, the year minus 333, and that is when Alexander the Great comes to Israel. And there's a story how he meets the greatest rabbi, and he bows for him and shows that the rabbi the most important, and not him. Of course, it's a historically valid story, no doubt. But this is the beginning of the Greeks ruling of Israel, and at that time, this is also when more or less the time that starts what we called Knesset HaGdola. If you follow the shiurim on Wednesday, you remember that the first Mishnah talks about the delivery of the Torah, of the oral Torah from Moses. So it says Moshe kibel Torah miSinai u'mesara leYoshua, and gave it to Joshua, Yoshua lazkenim, to the elderly, and kenim leneviim, they gave it to the prophets. U'neviim masaru al anshei Knesset HaGdola. Knesset HaGdola is probably the most unknown time historically, unclear. We don't have any sources, any things to tell about them, but probably one of the most important parts to go from the Torah Judaism as we know it to Judaism we know it today. This is like the start of Judaism as we know it today, even before the destruction of the temple. For example, from their time, we already have things written in Sefer Ezra and Nehemiah, books that are in the Bible, and there you have the start of prayers as we know them today, going from the Psalms to a different, more structured prayer, and probably many other things, but very hard to point exactly what they did. And the end of Knesset HaGdola, and all the beginning of Masechet Avot, of this Masechet Avot in the Mishnah, historically, what they call here Tkufat HaZugot. And this is a period that is extremely important in Jewish tradition, because suddenly the ones who are the most important people in the Jewish way of thinking are the rabbis. This is where the power was taken from the priests and came to the rabbis instead. Before, the Kohanim were supposed to be the spiritual leaders of Israelites. But what happens with the priests, with the Kohanim? That they ruin everything. As you all know the story of Hanukkah. I'm sure you all know it. That starts from the fact that different Kohanim are buying the posts of who will be Kohen Gadol from the Greek king. So they go to the Greek king and say, I will pay you so and so, and you will announce that I am the Kohen Gadol. And it goes and these are real Kohanim. So people who are part of the Kohanim families, who are supposed to be the spiritual leaders of Israel, who start buying the priesthood, and in many ways will be similar to what we know from Christianity about the Pope, right? About how different families were. It was like question of power, not question of spirituality. And the rabbis start saying, we can't leave Judaism to people who are not trustworthy. We're not taking them off their role in the temple. Of course, we can't serve in the temple. They have to. But serving in the temple is downgraded, as it's that they are under the rabbis. And you can see the rabbis in the Tkufat HaZugot, for example, who tells the Kohanim what they're supposed to do, who teach them. The Mishnah even describes in the Yom Kippur how they cry when they need to do that. They need to explain to the Kohen Gadol, and they are cry that they came to such a terrible situation that they can't rely on that the Kohen Gadol knows what he's doing. That they have to explain to him and take him hand in hand in every aspect of what he does, and make him swear that he will do it properly. This was a terrible time, but this is the time the power goes out from the temple to the rabbis and the ones who will define what is the right thing to do Jewish-wise. And that takes us to the time of, as I said, I'm only focusing on this line. So from the Zugot, we go to Tanaim. What is the word Tanaim? It's a word that you should already know.
Sages?
Not exactly, because sages will be sages will be Chachamim. Like we would say Chazal, Chachamenu Zichronam Livracha, the wise, right? The sages. But that will include both the Zugot and the Tanaim and the Moraim. But there are the huge differences between Tanaim and Moraim and Zugot. For example, one of the Zugot is Hillel and Shammai, right? That we know many discussions. So they are also part of the Tanaim, but they are from a different period. Yeah, what is Tanaim? Sarah? I thought you would try to say something. To answer, no?
No, I'm just stealing from Gisa Sarah because she wrote teachers. I read it out loud.
Yeah, but teachers, okay.
Yeah.
So, no, I haven't seen that. I can see now the messages in the chat. I don't see.
Yeah, so I stole her.
It's okay,
but
Sarah.
teachers
That's
are
the only word I
similar to
remember.
sages. Tanaim is the rabbis of the Mishnah. Taf and Shin are letters that can they can switch. And the rabbis of the time of the Mishnah are Tanaim. Tana Lishnot, the one who says by heart the learning. So these are the Tanaim, while Amoraim are the sages of the Talmud, of the Gemara. Okay, Tana is Mishnah, Amora is Gemara. And what is the main way to see the difference between one and the other? when you read it, very simple.
Rav and
Rabbi, yes, Daniel?
Rav and Rabbi.
Yes, thank you. Rabbi or Rav? Rabbi or Rav? Rabbi is the Hebrew word. It comes from also from the same source that is not Hebrew, of Rav, which is great. So in the time of the Mishnah, Tanaim will be always Rabbi, or won't have a name. Like Hillel and Shammai, they weren't rabbis because the word didn't exist. So they're not called Rabbi Hillel. They're Hillel and Shammai. But when the word Rabbi starts, you have before a few that are Rabban, and then Rabbi. And in the old time of Tanaim, you have Rabbi. This as a thumb rule, they will always be part of the Tanaim until the period that switches, and then you have like a generation that has both because it goes from the one to the other. So Rabbi Yochanan is the end of Tanaim and the start of Amoraim. But then all Amoraim will be called Rav. Rav Shmuel, Rav Chisda, Rav Rav Yosef, all the great rabbis of the Talmud that you met so many times, they will be called Rav, and this is a period of Amoraim. Then we go again to a period that is less known and less understood, is the time of the Savoraim. Savoraim are the ones who probably were the main editors of the Talmud. There are some parts in the Talmud that are accepted by most rabbis that are written by Savoraim, called Sugyot Savoraiyot. So things that were written in later stage. We actually don't know any Savoraim. They are the ones who did the most probably amazing work, but without getting any honor of who they were. And then we go over to the time of the Geonim. What's very important here is a great change of geography. That we go from Jews lived in Israel. There were a few Jews in Israel all the time, in the land of Israel. But already after the first exile, many Jews stays in other places. So Jews stays in Babylon also after Jews are coming back. So there is already a Jewish life in Babylon. One of the greatest examples, the one I mentioned, Hillel, is Hillel HaBavli. He came from Babylon to Israel, but it means that he was a great sage and a wise and a chacham in Babylon at the time before he moved to Israel. And so we have Jewish life there, but it wasn't the main center. And the center shifts in the time of the Talmud. So the Mishnah is still, when we say 2000, when we sing in a tikva Batznot Alpay, it's not exactly correct. And when we say 2,000 years of exile, this is completely not correct. Because all of us know that the Mishnah was written in Israel, right? You know, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the one who edited Mishnah, and he did it around the year 200, long after 130 years after the destruction of the temple. And Jews continued to live there and created the Talmud Yerushalmi of the many hundred years after the Mishnah. So we know that, but we forget that. We all think we go with the story that the Romans took us to exile. They took many Jews to exile, but not all of them. And there was a huge Jewish center in the years after. And that's also important to remember. The main changes actually by demographics and not by internal force, but more some pressure and hunger and quality of life that pushes people more and more to create the center in Babylon. And then we have there at the time of the time of the Talmud, you have Rosh HaGolah, you have the head of the Golah that becomes more and more important, and many at that time more important than what happened in Israel, and it finishes completely around the years like 700, 800, when 900 maybe, that really goes down, either because people in Israel converted to Islam, either because the rest left. But the last great creation that we have in the land of Israel is the book that we all, the main Tanakh that was written, Keter Ram Tzova, was written in Tiberias in around the year 900. So there were the great Jewish writings too in those years. So here we are in the middle of the time of the Geonim, but there it's clear that the Geonim, Gaon was the head of the Jews. It was a position, being a Gaon. So you have if we go down here, you will see here Rabbi Saadia Gaon, that is like the most important, but there were many other Geonim at the time that they were the head. It's called Geonim because the name of the head of the here. Yeah, don't try to look too much here. This is Saadia Gaon. So again, go and play with this. I'll send you the link in the WhatsApp, so you can play with it as much as you want when you have time. I want to give like the main periods. The time in the Geonim is a time that a new literature is created, the Safut Shut, Shelot v'Tshuvot, that the Gaon would have gotten questions from different from all around the world, and will write answers. And that's when the time of the Shelot v'Tshuvot, and these answers were gathered in collections and books of Shelot v'Tshuvot, and that happened this time of the Geonim. And then come a great change here in the time of the Rishonim. Okay, you can see here the Rishonim between 1038. This is the time that the Geonim are not, it's not anymore a position of one person who's the head of the whole Jewish world. We don't have one main leader. That's why we go to a period when rabbis around the world, where we had very important rabbis, but you don't have that one leader that everyone follows. You don't have that anymore. You have that in the time of the Geonim, that everyone are in a way have to follow the Gaon. That doesn't exist anymore from the time of the Rishonim and until today. That you don't have anymore a centralized power, a centralized rabbinical power. That doesn't exist anymore since the period of the Geonim. And as I said, the Geonim had position also to not only to the Jews, but also out from the world around. So to the authorities of Babylon or Egypt or such, they will be the one representing the Jews. So they had both the political power and the religious authority. Yes, and now, so we come to the time of the Rishonim. The one that you know from the Rishonim, of course, the most important is you have Rambam, Maimonides. You have Rashi, that probably many of you know. The Tosfot of the interpreters of Talmud, and all of these. This is a time that the Jewish center moves to Spain. So slowly, gradually move from Babylon through Egypt and to Spain. And Spain is the main central Jewish center until the expulsion, until the Jews were kicked out of Spain in, very easy to remember, what year?
1492.
1492, exactly. It's easy to remember because the same year of that they came to America too. And that is the end of the Tqufat Rishonim, not because maybe connected to that, but this is when, at the same time, it's the time of the writing of Shulchan Aruch, which is a huge change of the way Jews, after that, write Jewish books. So this is also the time one of those who were expelled was Rabbi Yosef Karo, who writes Shulchan Aruch. And after he writes Shulchan Aruch, all the rabbis start like using Shulchan Aruch, both him and Remar, which we mentioned so many times, and they relate to that. And that's why we call the Rishonim is the first, it's before Shulchan Aruch. Achronim is the last, after Shulchan Aruch. And probably historically, it's very hard to call them the last, because how would they be looked upon in 1,000 years? It's maybe more complicated. I don't know. It's the last because they are the last one before us today. But these are the main periods. This is very like the. I went through the basics, the very, very basics of the Jewish timeline, and now you can continue play as much as you want and learning and see more. There's so much more to see and remember. But the main part is like the movement of the center, and which kind of books are those we all relate to. This is when we look in the Jewish history. So going from Israel to Babylon, Egypt, and Spain, and then Europe, this is like one aspect of the geographical center of Jews that today also changed again. So we had the last 100 years, the huge change of that. When we go 100 years back, for example, Jews were Ashkenazi Jews were more than 90% of Jews in the world, and most of them living in Europe. And of course, after the Holocaust, Hitler changed completely the demographic, and the main center through the 20th century was the United States, and slowly Israel became bigger and bigger until today, where probably the Jewish population in Israel is bigger than the States. And so that is the greatest change that happened for Jews since they were kicked out of Spain. So that was, I would say, another amazing era that we still live in and watch and see, which is very, very important. So remember these parts and the literature, going from Tanakh to Mishnah to Talmud to the Geonim, the Shut, Rishonim, and Achronim. This is a way to understand how the Jewish thought come forward from generation to generation, how it evolves and changes, and maybe continues until today. You can do this shiur in so many different ways. It's very hard to cover the whole Jewish history in one shiur. You need probably few semesters for that. But yeah, the limud, our studies, they didn't finish today. It's only a start. Yes.
One question is today. You said that it's like there is no one rabbi that decides. So the rabbi in Jerusalem has nothing to do with the rabbi maybe in New York. I mean, I don't know.
No, they're connected, but you don't have a centralized. You don't have a centralized rabbinical authority. The chief rabbis of Israel are not the most important rabbis of our time, not at all.
But there
was a period when Rav Ovadia was, you could say that the Sephardi chief rabbi was the most important. But other than him, there was not one rabbi that you could say he was the most important rabbi of his time. Not one of the chief rabbis. He was the only one, Rav Ovadia Yosef, and he was only for the Sephardi, the most important rabbi, not for the Ashkenazi ones. So you didn't have one. So you don't have any main. In the States, definitely you don't have any centralized organizations that the rabbis will agree on, and it's I can say which are the most important rabbis today, but I can't say the most important rabbi. And even if I would say the most important rabbi, he doesn't have any political power. He's only have his writings and his teachings to talk on his behalf. And if he will do something wrong, he will go down in the. So he's not. He didn't get the power from the outside in no way. There's no centralized power structure for rabbis today.
Is
a good thing.
Is the Rav Lau in Jerusalem? Not anymore.
But Rav Lau is not an important rabbi at all.
And who is now
Halachically,
in the
authority. Rav David Lau never wrote a book that other rabbis were like, wow, this is halacha. He's the greatest halachic scholar of our time. It was a political thing.
Okay. But who is now there in Jerusalem? Is
the chief rabbi or the most important rabbi?
But who is now?
Rav David Lau is the son of Rav Israel Meir Lau, the one who. But the books, for example, that Rav Israel Meir Lau wrote were much more popular books than books of Jewish thought that will last or something. Very few of the books that are written today will be a great masterpieces. Maybe Rav Ovadia Yosef's books will be like masterpieces for history. When I look back and see which books became something that everyone relate to and quote, I don't see today something that will be as important. The focus in the last 100 years was more political and creating the state of Israel. So it's fine that the focus was somewhere else. And then the creation of a new Jewish book will become a new Shulchan Aruch that will change. Only time will tell. But we try to do the historical perspective today, so that's why I would say this. I don't think there are great enough rabbis in our time that will be learned in 300 years. Maybe I think the only one will probably be Rav Ovadia Yosef, but that's more for the Sephardi. So yeah, good. Any other questions? It's too big, so it's harder to ask questions, right? Because the issue is too big. Good. So I will tell you happy Lag BaOmer and have a great Sunday. We have a wedding today in the synagogue, which is always great to celebrate. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.